all heard of rags to riches storytelling, an archetypical scenario that sees an everyday nobody aspire towards greater things such as fame and power. A prominent example of this would be the 1983 crime thriller Scarface. In our modern economic climate, this form of storytelling could be used as a way to generate empathy towards an audience who are experiencing the same predicament in a particular moment in time. Take for example the 1929 Wall Street crash. During the Great Depression, caused by the collapse of the US stock market, Hollywood cinema saw a complete transformation in its market as it began to cater to the needs of the general public, producing more light-hearted escapist comedies such as those of Charlie Chaplin as opposed to moody dramas. In a case like the Great Depression, rags to riches stories typically gave audiences much more hope, as it generated thoughts of a bright future towards their aspirations. Then there's the opposite approach to such a market that is now broadly defined as the art cinema. Following the Second World War and the collapse of Mussolini's regime, Italy was left in economic disaster, sparking the rise of neo-realist filmmaking. Neo-realism focused on looking at how the country's collapse affected the lives of various social groups, from poverty to oppression. These narratives were the exact opposite of rags to riches, as they typically ended ambiguously and unresolved. They didn't serve to be uplifting rather than to empathize with audiences on a very different level to the Hollywood moneymaker. For example, and I promise that this is the last film example, the 1948 neo-realist film Bicycle Thieves followed a father and son looking for a stolen bike that would leave the father unemployed. They never find the bike, but that wasn't the point. The point was that it highlighted Italian society and how different individuals coped with the economic pressure. Now enter the world of Grand Theft Auto.
Fuck you! What the fuck?
Celebrated and criticized for its ultra-violent, non-politically correct open-world antics, GTA allows players to take control of a low-level thug with the goal of pursuing this ideal of the American dream, defined as the pursuit of happiness. Despite what dictators think, video games are a source of pleasure and relief that get less credit than they deserve. At its core, GTA is a prime example of a sandbox shooter that allows players to have the freedom to do what they want in a simulated world much like our own. At face value, it sounds like a cheap attempt to grab a large market of hyper-testosterone, but let's consider the experience the player has. Parents, politicians, and other lay people have openly condemned violent games like GTA as a supposed influence on violent behaviour, which according to psychological research contributes to a very small percentage among particular individuals, and there still isn't enough cemented evidence to make this argument anywhere deemed meaningful. I'm not here to make an argument about violence in video games, as the question and answer are practically non-existent, but from the perspective of a large majority of gamers, the consensus tends to lie around the fact that these games serve as part of the safety valve institution, a term which functional sociology defines as an organization, like the household, that houses the mechanism of self-control and relief. Think of it as a place to let off steam. As a leisurely pastime, video games have just as an important role in reducing the harshness of everyday life as any fairy tale generated by Hollywood. The storytelling of GTA rests on being a satire of American culture, from reimagining the landscape of New York and Los Angeles to the materialistic mindset of human nature. When these real-world relatable themes are embedded within the seemingly mindless and exaggerated gameplay, it creates something more profound. We are treated to our spectrum of the American dream. The gritty reflection of our own world becomes a fantasy or a simulation, which for most of us is as far as we'll come to achieving such over-ambitious goals. Some of us, to give another example, will never be professional sports athletes, but we can embed our aspiration by being in an amateur or recreational club, which essentially gives us the same relief. What I'm trying to say is, dreams will never be proportionate to what is realistically achievable, and that's why leisure is such a significant part of life. In the case of video games, we are able to find that little something that we can relate to and use it as a way to enjoy the time we waste. None of us want to be a soldier at war, but we can achieve a sense of adrenaline through games that simulate us into the battlefield. We sort of fall into a paradox. On the one hand, we don't want to face death or get in trouble, but on the other hand, we do want to see what it's like. This is exactly the power of empathy a medium like cinema or video games can do. Grand Theft Auto gives us the opportunity to see what it's like to cross moral lines. We see what it's like to be outside our comfort zone, at the same time feel relaxed within our safety valve institution. Basically, fighting terrorists or running away from cops from the comfort of your bedroom. Dreams allow us to leave boredom behind, and games like GTA allow us to control an image of ourselves that we partially want to be, if not necessarily become that person. Walter White can tell you a few things about that.
You're goddamn right.
To simply put it, the world would be a much more interesting place if we were in control.
You're goddamn right.
Of course it had to be in there. In part 2, we'll talk a bit more about the individuals of GTA that highlight the contradicting mindset of the economy, focusing on greed and hypocrisy. Until then, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts, and if possible, show the video to others. There's still new videos on the way.